Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I just want to start off with some bad news, which is that our colleague who works for the Center for Risk Analysis, our sort of sister think tank, has one of our colleagues has passed away. Ian Cruikshanks was 82, and he was an economist for the Center for Risk Analysis. Unfortunately, we got news today that he has passed away. He was a great guy to work with back when we still were in an office. It was a lot of fun. He always have kind of funny things to say. He would come and talk to everyone around the office to get their views on things, and he often had these very memorable lines that he would say. Of course, the most famous being,
"Where's the money going to come from?"
Exactly, and it was always great fun to talk to, and he'll be very sorely missed. I don't know if my colleagues Terence or Marius want to say anything as well about Ian before we start the show.
Yeah, he was just echo what you said there. He was a good guy. Always had time for, if you wanted to ask him something, he always had a lot of time for other people. He'd come to his office and have a chat to them, ask him about economics and concepts you didn't understand. He was always happy to give his time and explain to you. He was also one of those guys. As I said, we still had an office. He'd wander the corridors looking for somebody to talk to. Sometimes he'd be busy and wanting to walk and corner you, then he'd give a big chat about the state of the nation. But yeah, he was a very good guy, and I'm sure his family, I believe he had 4 sons. I don't know if he had any grandkids, but his wife is still alive. So condolences to his wife and his children and any of his friends who might be listening to this. And rest in peace to Ian.
Indeed.
No, I just remember that line. Where's the money going to come from? You kind of summed up South Africa's dilemma. So an interesting little tidbit. I understand his father was a World War II pilot and was killed in action.
Oh wow! Okay.
He'd also that was one thing about Ian. He'd tell you he was born in the UK, but his father was South African and was flying for the RAF, and he'd always insist, even though he was born in the UK. His dad was South African and he was a regte South Afrikaner. He'd always make you very aware of the fact that he was not English at all, and he was definitely South African despite being born there.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, he will be sorely missed. But anyway, we must get on with the show. So I am joined, of course, today by Mr. Terence Corrigan and Mr. Marius Roodt. And for our first topic today, we're going to be talking about the current brouhaha around advertising. So some of our colleagues are actually currently speaking, I believe, to the Human Rights Commission, who are holding an inquiry into what they think is racist advertising in South Africa. And of course, we've seen a couple of big social media and in sometimes sort of physical storms of a sort after several companies allegedly posted racist ads or what were claimed to be racist ads online. One of these was famously for the TRESemmé brand of shampoo, which showed a number of women with different hair problems. And in a cropped version of the image, which went viral on social media, there was a white woman whose hair was described as normal, and then there was a black woman whose hair was described as dry and frizzy. Anyway, this ended up resulting in several Clicks stores being sort of mashed up by people sort of wearing EFF regalia. And Clicks eventually met with the leadership of the EFF. And of course, famously, Julius Malema said at the beginning, just before all of this happened, that fighters must attack Clicks. So, of course, I'm sure many of us remember that. A court has just ruled, however, that in fact the TRESemmé shampoo advert was not discriminatory, says, I believe it's the Western Cape Equality Court. The court, there was a case brought against the company and Clicks by 17 women who claimed that they were racially discriminated against by the advert, but the judge found that in context with the full advert, it was very clear that this was not a racist ad. And actually, it was just a bit of selective editing by people on social media to cause outrage that really provoked things. While we've had that finding at the Human Rights Commission, EFF MP and Glozy has said that the advertising industry must be fined 50 billion rand for perpetuating racism, and that half of this should go to the SABC. So I've unpacked a bit of stuff there, guys. Let me start with you, Marius. What do you make of all this fuss about racist ads, and what do you make about the EFF's solution to this problem in the form of the 50 billion rand fine?
Well, I think it's quite telling that somebody on social media actually had to make up what was effectively a fake ad to claim that Clicks was racist, and then it was obviously all kind of egged on by EFF leadership, and I'm sure by the usual suspects on social media. And I mean, even if you take the original ad, I mean not the original ad, the fake ad, even there, I mean it's it was probably, if you want to be charitable about it, and you should be, it was obviously just poorly worded, and it wasn't saying that black people have like terrible hair, but anyway, it was a fake ad, and somebody put it onto social media, and it just shows you that there's this kind of maliciousness out there, that people actually want to, claim that there's racism when there isn't. I mean, that's obviously not to say that racism still doesn't exist in South Africa, but I'd certainly, I mean, our polls, the Institute of Race Relations polls have shown it's certainly not the biggest problem facing South Africans. When people are asked what are the biggest problems in South Africa, it's normally things like unemployment, poverty, crime. Racism is often one of the, it's only mentioned by 1 or 2% of respondents as one of the biggest issues facing South Africa. So yeah, it's pretty, it's just the usual thing in South Africa, looking for outrage when it doesn't really exist. And I mean, it boggles my mind that anybody still takes the EFF seriously. I mean, 50 billion rand, it is, as the comment says, a Dr. Evil amount, and I mean, I'm sure the advertising industry isn't even close to being worth that much. But also, let's say that we do decide to fine the advertising industry 50 billion rand. Who is the advertising industry? Who will pay, how will they decide how much an advertising agency must pay? Each advertising agency must pay. We'll just split it like, between each of them, or depending how big you are, what your turnover was. And it's all just kind of, normal. So, yeah, it's usual silly thing that the EFF is saying, and people are, just gets reported on, and people nod sagely. But I will say, though, in the News 24 article on Nglozi's, the demand that the advertising agency pays 50 billion rand, they are actually quite critical of him, and Nglozi claims, he has a quote from that. And Nglozi said things were even worse in the billboard market, which he claimed without evidence was an all-white boys club. So I think good for them, at least saying like this guy's basically making up things on the fly. But we all know that's pretty much how
right.
it does things anyway.
Yeah, I'm quite selectively describing Nglozi, the full measure of Nglozi's statements here. He also went on to say that, the advertising industry is owned by foreign whites, and sort of an implication there that it needs to be sort of nationalized or indigenized or something like that.
But
anyway,
it's the same. It's the kind of witgevaar that I've mentioned before in the show. It's like just change whites to Jews or Muslims or foreigners or whatever you want to say. It's like it's a usual kind of rhetoric that you get, in lots of places around the world, and something that we definitely need to push back against. And it's just, same as if we said if we said it was, as I say, it was owned by Jews or Muslims, or if it was in the UK and people were saying this is owned by all these blacks, like as if it's such a terrible thing. I mean, there's no evidence of it, and we can talk about this for hours.
Terence, your thoughts on what game is the EFF playing here, and what do you make about all this fuss about racist adverts or supposedly racist adverts?
Last year you and I produced that report on fake news, and I find it very, very enlightening that when it came to something like this, the bona fides of the allegations were accepted without demur. For me, I think actually the most sinister part of all this was the way Clicks just capitulated and fell into the EFF's narrative immediately. This is bigger than outrage over an advert. Now, also, I could be misremembering this, but I don't think so. I read that the Human Rights Commission says, well, they're not going to be looking at any specific adverts. They want to look at the sort of structural conditions, which seems to me, well, we don't have actually anything to focus on. So let's, just take it as read.
They do provide 4 pieces of adverts that they say are symptomatic of the whole kind of rot in the system, or 5 adverts. And one of them is this TRESemmé ad, which the Equality Court has just found is in fact not racist. So
yeah, no, and that's an interesting point. How many hundreds or thousands of adverts are you exposed to in any given year, online, on television? You click on YouTube and it throws up before you can get to watch a cat falling down or whatever it is that you do on YouTube, or the Daily Friend Show maybe. So no, it's just a statistical fact. You have a wide enough sample, you're going to find something that's off color. I mean, I dare say, let's take 1,000, I don't know, human rights commissioners and put them in a row and let's audit their lives. I'm sure you'll find some weird stuff crawling out of the woodwork. But yeah, you see my point. It's the EFF's game. I think at least that's fairly obvious. They want outrage. They want division. That's kind of what you expect from a political organization that's constituted on their basis. I think this says some terrible things though about the spinelessness of business, and I think it says even worse about the government. I mean, we talk about needing to create however gazillion jobs that the country needs. Yet, can you see any investor, local or foreign, watching premises be trashed with very little intervention and saying, "Oh, that's a nice place. Let's go do business here." No, you can sort of have one thing or the other. You can have a civil debate. You can no, snappy haircut. Thank you very much, Deborah. This was actually just we were talking about foreigners. This was done by my Gujarati barber, the barber from Gujarat. I think there's a John le Carre novel there somewhere. This is a good title, I thought. That's kind of the line that needed to be drawn. Let me just make one other comment. When there was an H&M advert, the one with the black child and the coolest monkey in the jungle logo, that was greeted with horror and howling. And I remember the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation wanting to meet with their board. Now, around about a couple of weeks later, a couple of months later, perhaps, Chinese state TV did a Chinese New Year special about Africa. This had the full gamut of blackface, obscenely large buttocks. This was something you might have expected from a sort of Victorian freak show. That is available on YouTube. In fact, it shouldn't come with much. You'll be able to find it without much ado, and you can actually find a link in one of the articles I've written. I haven't known anyone in South Africa to get upset about that. Yet, the same Chinese state media operates in South Africa. It's far more. There's a far wider reach than a Swedish clothing ban. And suspiciously or strangely, nothing has been said. So yes, selective outrage indeed.
I definitely agree with that. I also, I despair somewhat that, the Human Rights Commissioners, I mean, sure, looking into race relations, I mean, that's what we do for a living in a lot of ways, right? That's like the primary focus of our institution. I get it. There's definitely value there. But when it comes to the abuse of human rights in South Africa, I can think of other places which might be more pressing. Everything from gangsters taking over towns to illegal mining operations to children drowning in pit toilets. And now we're going to have a couple of weeks of this filling the news. Really doesn't seem like it should be that important to me. Anyway, Marius, final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Spot on there. I think the Human Rights Commission has pretty got other things to investigate. I mean, nobody's been brought to book, for example, for causes death. And probably nobody ever will be. But seems to be more important for the Human Rights Commission to focus on.
Right.
Well,
No, that's a
you know,
really
if you want to, if you want to cycle back there, remember, no one's brought to book for Marikana for the 69 deaths during the security guard strike in what was it, 2007 or so. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of blood lying lying across this country. But the thing is that racism is something that can be that will be assured of an audience.
Mm. Mm.
No,
I must say,
a lot of us perhaps have to look in the mirror about that.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest here and say that if I put the word racist or racism in the title of a YouTube video, which will probably be in the title of this video, I haven't read the title yet, it'll do much better on YouTube than if it wasn't in the title. And I think that does say something about the weird place we are in as a country. Anyway, let us move on to our next topic. And this is the curious case of the grounding of Comair. Now, Comair, I believe, operates the British Airways and Kulula.com flights. And over the weekend, after a series of safety concerns, I think there were a couple of flights that had to turn back because they were worried that there was some sort of safety issue on board. The South African Civil Aviation Authority revoked Comair's license to operate. Now, this caused an enormous. This happened very suddenly. It happened pretty much over a weekend, and it caused a lot of problems for a lot of people, especially on that very busy route between Joburg and Cape Town, where a lot of people suddenly had to kind of try and get on another flight. And for many, SAA was the only option, which, as I'm sure anyone who's had to fly, that's not always the most welcome thing in the world. So it's the sort of suddenness of it, the fact that it's kind of, some people have suggested that it wasn't, the safety concerns are being addressed or wasn't as big a deal or something like that, that this was an attempt by the Civil Aviation Authority. This is the theory I've heard, and I have no idea if there's any credibility behind it. And that's what I want to ask you guys, is that the Civil Aviation Authority is being unduly harsh on Comair to try and get create more space for SAA. And I believe Comair is currently facing some major financial troubles as well. Terence, what do you make of that conspiracy theory? And what do you make of this issue in general?
Okay, I think that that one needs to show an inch of humility here. It's a big thing if there is an issue with an airline safety. So grounding it is not inherently a bad thing. It may be warranted. The only comment that I could make in relation to what you describe as as a conspiracy theory is that none of this stuff, unfortunately, is beyond the realms of possibility. I don't think that there is really any grounds left in South Africa to have any significant degree of faith in the conduct of the government at all. Unfortunately, too many of these organizations have been suborned. The state of professionalism is often not there. Now, this may well not be the case. There are a flex and spots and islands of excellence in our state machinery, but we're in a mental place as a country where I think the default is to assume the worst, rather than to worry that something may have gone wrong. So I'm just glad I'm not flying.
Yes, no, this is a great time to not be flying. Marius, your thoughts on this? Do you think that everything is above board here?
Well, I mean, it's obviously without being able to go, behind the scenes to know what's going on. I suppose you've got to take what the Civil Aviation Authority is saying at face value initially. But there has been some ramblings about the CAA in the past. There's an airline called TRESemmé. It's a kind of a small one that flies to places like Margate and Plet and so on. They were also grounded a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2018 or 2019. And they said they were grounded unfairly. They also took the CAA to court. and they said the statements around the grounding was inflammatory and harming the airline's reputation and so on. So who knows? And I mean, we all know what's been happening in South Africa. I mean, I would not be surprised at all if there is something behind this, and Comair and Kalula and so on were grounded to allow SAA to pick up the slack and force people to get onto SAA flights. So, and just reading from the issue of it, it seems that with Comair, it's got a fleet of about 26 planes, and this issue of the grounding is only linked to the incident, whatever it is, only is linked to 2 aircraft. So if that is correct, then the entire fleet's been grounded for an issue that's only affecting 2 aircraft. And yeah, if you're grounding 30 planes or 26 planes or whatever it is, when only 2 should actually be grounded, then it's obviously going to affect the operations. And Comair has been around for many years. I think since I'm open to correction here, but I think even the 1930s, but I might be incorrect on that. But it's been around for a very long time. And yeah, if you'd think they'd be able to maintain their fleet. So I think we have to just wait to see what's going on here. But I'm sure if the Civil Aviation Authority hasn't done anything about board, I'm sure we'll see. This won't be the end of it. I'm sure we'll probably see this battle be taken to court if there is anything to Comair's complaints.
Right, and go on, Terence.
I just on coming back to what Marius said about the overreaction or excessive penalties. This is something that the mining industry has complained about. They say mining inspectors often do not actually understand the industry, and you can have the most sort of trivial problems. I remember a couple of years ago, I was speaking to one guy who has a quarrying business. He said his operations were shut down because the antiseptic cream in the first aid kit had expired. It wasn't a case of go to Dis-Chem and buy a new one. No, we're going to shut the whole operation down, and then we'll have to come and go through the rigmarole. There've been cases where there have been safety concerns about one part of a mine, but the mine system is extremely large. So, but the whole thing gets taken out. There is a balance that needs to be struck between dealing with legitimate safety or health concerns and understanding the need to not to undermine the commercial viability of an operation. And maybe that's the big story here.
Right, and I guess that's also where some of the suspicion about this comes from, is the fact that South Africa's bureaucracy does have a habit of being, shall we say, a bit overzealous sometimes in issues like this. As you point out, mining is probably the best example of that when it comes to safety concerns. All right, let us move on to our next story now, and this is about China. So China is currently having a big COVID wave, as it seems like a lot of the rest of the world has very much passed COVID by. A lot of data coming out from the UK and also some supporting evidence from South Africa, I believe, over the past couple of months that shows that COVID now, due to the number of people who've already been infected and have natural immunity, to the number of people who've been vaccinated, and also to the lessening severity of the virus, as it seems to be evolving into a less severe way of being, that it's now officially less dangerous than flu. And I just see that the state of disaster has been extended by another month, so we're definitely going to have to talk about that on the show. But with that being said, so it looks like the pandemic is over for very large parts of the world. But in China, which has had very suspicious COVID numbers for a while, and I think there's been a lot of skepticism about how they were actually dealing with COVID, whether they might be suppressing the numbers, has decided to enact very harsh lockdown measures once again in response to COVID outbreaks there. So we're seeing Shenzhen, a city of 12.5 million people, has been locked down. Dongguan, 10.5 million people. Langfan, another city of 5.5 million. The province of Jilin, which has got 24 million people living in it. And there are also partial lockdowns in Shanghai and Xi'an, which are cities of 26 million and 13 million people, respectively. So this is, many times the population of South Africa across China pretty much being locked down um, in some of the world's harshest lockdown conditions. And this is after China supposedly rolled out, its own vaccine program to its population. And I've seen, at least on Twitter, so take this from where it comes, it's from Twitter, that the infection fatality rates of people in, for example, New Zealand, when you compare it to Hong Kong, and both of those are quite wealthy societies, but one has been vaccinated by Western vaccines and treated with sort of the European and North American medication, and Hong Kong, which has been treated with China's homemade vaccine. Hong Kong has much, much worse outcomes. So I think that this has definitely put a bit of a spanner in the works of China's reputation, which some health experts, bizarrely, in my opinion, lauded as this like great achievement in disease control. Terence, what do you make of all this?
Well, my instinct when hearing news out of China is to be skeptical, particularly if it's relentlessly good news, which is the kind of news that the Chinese state wants. Do you find it interesting that this is happening now as Russia's embroiled in a war, and it's like, what gods have we angered to plunge the world into the last couple of years? I believe that the situation in China was probably never as under control as it was made out to be. And I think what you're probably seeing here is not so much as not so much a resurgent wave as some of those underlying trends coming to the surface. I do think that there's an interesting point here, though. As you correctly pointed out, just two or three of those cities match the population of South Africa. China is able to sort of control its population like that. It's just really not possible in South Africa. Even, when we had the army patrolling the streets and, beating people to death in their front yards and things like that. In a sense, the lockdown in large parts of the country became a theoretical thing. It was harsh enough to do damage, but not really harsh enough to control people. And I was speaking to a schoolmate whom I hadn't seen for a while, a little while ago, and she was asking me about my views on South Africa's future. And I said, well, one thing is we're almost certainly going to remain a free society because we are simply too disorganized and chaotic, and the state is too ineffective to exercise that sort of control.
You can't have a police state without a working police.
We can't have a police state without a working police, with people who just kind of, sort of moon the cops as they carry on looting. I think that if you remember the July riots last year, and they've been in the news a bit now with these reports that are coming out. I think the seminal image was watching these police constables with shotguns sort of walking up and down as this crowd was pillaging a mall, but the crowd actually wasn't rushing. They were kind of going in quite calmly with, their trolleys and loading up with flat screens and washing machines and, duvets and TRESemmé hair products and whatever. And occasionally our law enforcement officers would, discharge a round or so, but it was less that they were impotent than they were irrelevant. Like, all right, you're going to shoot at us. Well, fine, you go ahead. Yeah, no, it's there's something very different between the two societies. Also, it makes a nonsense of the idea that China could serve as a model for South Africa. Whether it's a good idea or not.
That's very true, I think. Marius, what do you make of China's COVID troubles?
Just one thing I just want to mention is that just shows you the sheer scale of China. There's some cities there that you mentioned with populations of 6, 7, 8 million people, which is more than live in the whole of Joburg, and it's a place you've never heard of. So it just shows you the scale of China. It's mind-boggling actually. But yeah, I think it's very rare that an authoritarian society is open with the truth and tells you what's really going on. And I think China's fudged its numbers for a very long time. And but even it's doing the wrong thing now. It's been shown that lockdowns don't work, and even though China can do it because I mean, you guys make the points. You couldn't do that in South Africa. And even in rest of the other democracies around the world where people are a bit more deferential to authority, people also a bit over it. I mean, you can lock down the UK again in any strict way, or other parts of Europe or most of the US. So I think people are just in democracies and places where they expect to be free will just not accept it anymore. And I think the lockdowns simply don't work to stop infection. And I think this is putting it just shows that China is not this efficient place that people should be looking to. I think a lot of their numbers and their achievements are probably definitely the numbers are fudged, and there's some smoke and mirrors around it. And I think they're definitely doing. I mean, they're still going for the zero COVID, which even New Zealand has accepted now as impossible. The only way you're going to beat this thing is through things like vaccines, and it's almost burnt itself out now. Anyway, I saw some research from the UK which shows that Omicron is now less dangerous than the ordinary flu. So even amongst people who are a bit older, people in their 80s and so on. So we're pretty much at the end of COVID now.
Right, and if a couple of small islands with 4 million sheep farmers can't do zero COVID, then a country of 1.2 billion people that has many land borders is certainly not going to be able to do it.
But if this is hitting some of their tech centers.
Now Shenzhen is like the most technologically developed city.
Right now, you take that with Ukraine and Russia, global supply chains. It just says the world's going to be very tough for the next couple of months.
No, definitely. That's definitely true. I think we, in some ways, haven't seen anything yet. Anyway, on that gloomy note, thank you very much for watching the show today. We will see you again tomorrow, and I hope you all have a most excellent and fantastic day wherever you are listening to us from. Cheers.